Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu unserem letzten Stream für diese Streamreihe im Sommer, um die Sommerpause ein bisschen zu überbrücken. Und hallo Sascha.
Hallo Sascha.
Ich will es gar nicht in die Länge ziehen. Hol bitte mal Jonas dazu.
Hallo zusammen, grüßt euch.
Weil ich bin ehrlich gesagt ein bisschen nervös gerade. Ich hätte einen Schnaps gebraucht, aber ich habe leider keinen im Hotelzimmer gefunden. Die Minibar ist auch leer, weil es keine Minibar gibt. Aber wir haben heute einen Gast und deswegen wechseln wir jetzt auch wieder ins Englische. Es ist einfach Wahnsinn. Und Sascha, please let him in.
Hey man,
Hey,
what's up?
welcome.
Alex Kozora.
Hello, Alex. How
you guys doing?
Thank you. How are you?
Doing well.
Great. All the way from
the
US. That's fucking amazing.
Yeah, this is a bit like a fanboy moment right now, I guess, for all of us.
Oh.
So
I appreciate that.
Just introduce yourself to our audience, please. I don't think you need to, but just for the record.
Sure. Yeah, my name's Alex Kozora, writer, co-owner of SteelersDepot.com. Been there since 2013. The site's been around since 2008. Have a great team, continue to grow, be out there at training camp in just a couple of weeks there every day, trying to provide a recap and, practice analysis for you guys. So excited for that because it is a boring time of the off season. You're trying to find things to write about and talk about right now. And so I can't wait for some real football action to discuss.
Yeah, that sounds really good because
That's
we will watch everything you do about the trope and stuff like that. But the first question that come to our mind was why and how did you start to write about the Steelers?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was writing for a couple other smaller sites, and then Dave Bryan, who founded Steelers Depot, just found me on Twitter one day and just said, "Hey, you want to write for me?" And we had a conversation, and I kind of was off from there. I've always, of course, been a sports fan, football fan, Steelers fan, and really what I was doing before I even began writing or doing it for anybody was just for myself. I would go back and tape Steelers games as a kid in high school and rewatch them and take notes, not for anybody, just for my own amusement, I guess. And now I just kind of do that as an actual job. So it just kind of, clearly I don't have the build of a football player. I am not a nose tackle or anything like that. So playing football was never really an option, but I could talk about it and analyze it and found a way to make it a job.
Nice.
So, what do you think about the fan base and especially the growing in the international fan base? Do you recognize that in America?
Did you even know there is a Steelers Nation Germany like before you got invited?
Oh. I did recognize it. I think that's one of the most unique things about this fan base, which I think is great in a lot of ways. But it's not just throughout the U.S., but it is international. It's you guys. The Mexico presence is off the charts. In Brazil, I've done some podcasts for Brazil Steelers podcast before. You guys probably hear on some of the podcasts that Dave and I do some of the reader email sections. We get emails from people all over the country. So I think Pittsburgh's unique because obviously everyone knows the story, or I think most people do, when the steel mills in Pittsburgh closed down in the 70s that took Steelers Nation all over the country. But I think there has to be an understanding and appreciation for the global impact. And you see that, Ireland, obviously with the Rooney family, you guys out there from a Germany based standpoint. Pittsburgh will be playing internationally soon, probably next year, either in Mexico or maybe at some point down the line in Ireland. So I think it's really cool because it is it's almost like a soccer team because it's a true global fan base.
Yeah. Ireland would be cool for us, I guess.
Now, you guys, the presence, not just Pittsburgh, but the NFL presence in Germany, I'm sure you guys can speak to it better than I can, but obviously it's growing and there's going to be some games there, I think, this year. So the NFL is certainly pushing for that global impact as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can just see that like, at least over here in Germany, like not just the Steelers, but like all of NFL. If you maybe see the numbers for the ticket sale for the international games, that's crazy. I mean, almost 3 million people requesting tickets for the just recently sold NFL game in Frankfurt. I think that's crazy. That's crazy.
It is. I was wondering for you guys, what do you think the draw is to not only the Steelers but the NFL throughout Germany and kind of Europe? What is it that's so appealing about the game that's bringing in those crazy numbers you talk about?
I guess it's a bit that soccer, the people in Germany are tired of soccer because you can watch it so many times over the year, and it's the thrilling part about football is the physicality. I think, normally a soccer player gets hurt and rolls 250 times over the place, over the pitch, and a football player, for example, Ben Roethlisberger, stands up, gets on his nose, it's broken, but he makes twice this and plays a full game. So I think that's the myth about football in Germany. Or what do you think, Sasha?
Yeah, it's kind of the same. I mean, it's something different. People like to discover something new, and most casual fans just watch a game and they want to know more about it when they watch it once. So like, hey, what's that? I like that on TV. So we have many different, I would say, phases of fans. We have the very casual fans who just know about football since a couple of years maybe, and then we have really diehard fans who go deep into the game itself with all the strategy and stuff. Even draft, like Jonas, that wasn't possible, I guess, 5 or 6 years ago. And we have the how should I say it? We can consume football much better nowadays than it was a few years ago. So that's a big reason too, I guess. You can watch anything on the internet now or the NFL Game Pass, so it's much easier to get access to the game.
I mean, that's the thing. They showed the Super Bowl maybe, or the playoffs, like 10 years back, and then all of a sudden they started broadcasting for the whole season in Germany. So obviously many people were about to just watch NFL on Sundays then, and that's why actually the Seahawks, for example, are such a popular team here in Germany. Don't ask me about my opinion on this. No, so
we will not.
It's becoming a thing, and now that the NFL is actually seeing that, like, the crowd is getting bigger and bigger. Yeah, I mean, it's just like an avalanche just coming down here.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic to see the game grow like this, and can only imagine what it's going to be like 10 years from now, but it's a really exciting time.
Yeah.
So how do you watch the Steelers games? As a fan or as a journalist?
It has changed for sure. It's a little less of the fan hat and a little bit more of that analyst hat, where you're thinking about, how am I going to write about this, and how am I going to talk about this and explain this and that kind of thing. There are certainly still fandom type moments, like when George Pickens had that crazy catch against the Browns, last year. That was total fandom. That was not an analyst. There's nothing to analyze. It's just an incredible play by George Pickens. But there is probably I'm a little more subdued, a little bit quieter, a little bit more kind of focused on how do I take the game and focus it and channel it into the work aspect of it, and writing and podcasting more so than I used to be. So there has been probably a change there.
Nice.
Okay. So a big part of Steelers Depot is your draft coverage. And how do you prepare for that? How do you how are you doing your draft preparation, and when do you start with it?
That's a challenging part, because I'm not like an NFL team that has a dedicated group of scouts that are doing that throughout the season. Now we have some real dedicated draft guys. Jonathan Heitrader is kind of our lead draft analyst, but I don't really start getting into the draft until the Steelers season ends. Unfortunately, they've been ending a bit too soon. I wish they would go a little bit longer, but so basically in mid-January is kind of when I start that. We attend the Senior Bowl, a big NFL draft event in Alabama each year, and so that kind of helps catch me up on some of the notable prospects and names, but there's really nothing to it. It's just, watching tape, producing reports, talking about it, reading what our other Steelers Depot contributors and writers have to say. But it is an accelerated process where at the start in January, I feel like I'm way behind. I don't know anything about this class, but usually by April, I'm pretty caught up. And the good thing is Pittsburgh, because they are so stable and consistent, even with a new GM and Omar Khan, they're a pretty predictable team. They know who they want. You know they're not going to draft a low character kind of guy. They want guys that have hearts and smarts and physicality and speed and production, from bigger schools typically. So that kind of helps narrow down the field of the guys that they usually gravitate towards, because there's a pretty clear and lengthy history of the guys they like.
But that's also one of the main reasons we like or even love that franchise, that stability and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 3 head coaches since 1969. I mean, that is just what's the stat? There were more popes since 1969 than there are Steelers head coaches. I mean, it's that model of stability. And I will say, I mean, I think Coach Tomlin's a really good coach. I don't want him gone, but there is pressure in 2023 for Pittsburgh to win a playoff game. They've not won a playoff game since 2016. That drought is, gone on for far too long. And so while I can appreciate and respect the Tomlin never having a losing season record, that's hard to do. Obviously, the standard is so much higher in Pittsburgh, and it's going to be tough this year. And the AFC is loaded with top quarterbacks, and Pittsburgh's still trying to find their way. But bar should be set high. This team's got to win a playoff game.
That's a good question. And I think the most part that has to improve, and maybe you can say if I'm right or wrong, is the offensive side of the ball. And what do you think about Matt Canada? You think he will be still offensive coordinator in 24?
It's based off what happens in 23. I'm sure you guys have as many questions about Canada, internationally as there is stateside. They got to produce. Mike Tomlin saying last year was it's time to land the plane. And for Canada and for this offense, and I agree, the offense is the bigger issue, the biggest concern of the two sides right now. This offense has to produce. They've been in the 20s in points per game across the NFL each of the last 2 years. They've been exactly the 23rd ranked red zone offense each of the last 2 years. You're not going to win in an AFC that has all these fantastic quarterbacks without scoring. Now, does Pittsburgh have to be a top 5 scoring offense? No, they don't have to be. Their defense is good enough for them to win some of those more low scoring type of games. But this offense has to average more than 18 point something points per game last year. In this modern era, in this AFC, in this very competitive AFC North with some really good quarterbacks in it, you got to score some points. And so, last year was tough. It was a bunch of new pieces, rookie quarterback changes, all that kind of stuff. You can theoretically give Canada a pass on that, but there is no pass this year. Pickett's the guy. Offense is better. They got to produce.
No excuses no more. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned him, or rookie quarterback, Kenny Pickett. Where do you rank him among the AFC North, and what are your expectations for next season?
Well, I'm encouraged by Kenny Pickett, but when it comes to AFC North quarterbacks, he is the 4th best quarterback in the AFC North. I just don't think there's, even the biggest Steeler fan could really say anything other than that. Now, Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, they're kind of having a similar conversation. What is Watson going to be like in year 2 with the Browns? But we know at his best, he can become, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And you got Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. When Jackson is healthy, he's, Pittsburgh's done well against him, but he's a dynamic player, and Joe Burrow has really grown. So Pickett is the 4th best quarterback in the AFC North, but he can get better. I expect him to get better. This is a big year 2 for him to make that jump. He's got the keys. He's the leader. He ended the season on a really high note. He's got to be able to continue that. And obviously, it's not just Kenny Pickett. It's the offense as a whole. The O-line's better. The skill positions are better. Defensively looks pretty strong. So, yeah, the AFC North, my favorite stat with the AFC North is last year, all the AFC North teams were 3-3 when they played each other in the AFC North. They were all 500. They just all beat each other up the entire year. That's how close it is. And so I think it's not a stretch at all to say the AFC North is and will be the most competitive division in the NFL, just because those teams are all talented, they're all close, and they all have a case to make.
So sorry for jumping topics a little bit, but chat is asking questions already. So I will throw a few in. Smiley89 asks, how did you acquire your knowledge about football?
Not talking to women well gives you a lot of free time. Is my joke. It's pretty easy to do. It's just, been over the years. It's not done in an instant, and I'm still trying to challenge and push myself to learn more, but it's a lot of watching videos. I'm a big fan of note taking and not even typing it, but writing it down, pen and paper. I think that's the best way for me and probably for most people to remember things. So I got a big folder next to me that have notes from 10 years ago about little things, big things when it comes to football, technique, X's and O's. And of course, having the job that I have, my job is to watch, football. And so I can study it, not just in my free time, but in my day-to-day life. And so when you watch this team and chart this team as religiously as I and the site does, you kind of naturally pick up on those things because you're so invested in it. So just kind of that, the decade I've been doing this, obviously teaches and keeps you engaged about this team and this game.
So let's continue with the questions of the chat. Andre wants to know, is Alex at the stadium for the games and the press conference like Tomlin Tuesday?
I am not. We have had occasionally press credentials for those types of things in the past, but as of right now, I am not now. I will be at training camp, not credentialed, but I'll be there, with the fans, which I think it works for me in a lot of ways. For those who don't know the setup, if you're press at training camp, you have to stand on the field. If you're just general attendance, like the rest of the fans, you're sitting in the bleachers. And for me, it's a lot easier to sit and write than try to stand and write. That'd be a lot more difficult to do. Now, we are credentialed for certain events, the NFL Combine, the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl. Those are big NFL draft events. We're credentialed for all those. I've been to the Senior Bowl many times and met Steelers scouts, and me and Omar Khan caught a plane to Charlotte trying to catch our flight before he became GM. So that was a real fun experience there. We hope to be credentialed for some pro days and other things like that. But no, I'm not credentialed. So, I don't consider myself, a beat writer or true media, but I don't care about the labels too much. I just focus on providing good coverage and analysis, and people seem to enjoy it.
Cool. So we continue with the question of Andre. What's your opinion on the contract situations of Alex Highsmith and Joey Porter Jr.?
Yeah, those are really good questions. With Highsmith, I'm confident a deal will get done before week 1, a long-term extension. I don't know if that's going to happen before training camp or after training camp, during it. I think it'll happen sometime during. We saw that with Chris Boswell and Deontay Johnson last year, but I am pretty confident a long-term deal will get done. That's Pittsburgh's model: draft, develop, retain. They drafted Highsmith. They've developed him. They don't want to let that guy go because he had a great breakout season last year, a great pairing opposite of TJ Watt. He's a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's a professional. I think he's going to remain a Steeler for a long time. Joey Porter Jr., just some patience there. He's kind of in a weird contract situation, being the 32nd overall pick, but being in the second round. There's some negotiation there. He may be one of the last, if not the last, rookies to sign before training camp, but a holdout is very unlikely to me. I think it will happen. It just may not happen until, say, July 24th or July 25th.
So will he be allowed to participate at the camp without a contract?
No, he'll have to have a contract to actually participate at camp. Okay. And that's the reason why I think it will get done, because no one wants to get to that point. And the way the rookie contracts sit today is, there used to be holdouts in the past, but those are very, very rare. I think the last holdout was like 2016 or 2017. So I would be pretty surprised. But yeah, Bosa. Yeah, exactly. And so I think, the odds of that happening are pretty low. So you'll have to probably wait another week or two, but it will get done before camp.
Your expectation about that, will he get a fully guaranteed contract like a first rounder?
No, I don't think it'll be fully guaranteed like a first rounder. It probably will be, and Dave Bryan knows this stuff more than I do. We had a conversation on the Terrible Podcast about it just the other day. probably it's that 4th year. I think it's the 4th year guaranteed money that's kind of the sticking point, but about 50%. So I would say half of that. It probably would not be fully guaranteed like a first rounder.
So what do you think about the Highsmith contract? It's not necessarily near on the amount of money that TJ get, or what do you think?
Right. It won't be there. Again, Dave Bryant has crunched some of those numbers and put together his projections. It won't be the TJ Watt. It'll obviously be a really significant sum, but it's not going to even really come all that close to what TJ Watt got. Watt's deal took a while, but it was almost easier because that's a top of the market deal. Everyone knew TJ Watt was going to be the highest paid guy at his position. Highsmith, you're trying to slot him somewhere in between a bunch of those top pass rushers. And so that makes it a bit trickier. But again, I'm pretty confident a long-term deal will get struck before week 1.
Okay.
I mean, now that that we're talking about both outside linebackers, where do you see Herbig playing? Like he's obviously the rotational outside linebacker, but do you see him like playing off ball or like some hybrid role, or because he's one of the lighter outside linebackers?
To start, Pittsburgh is committed to making him an outside linebacker, keeping him as an outside linebacker. That's what they've said. I think at some point in the future, they will realize and move him towards an off-ball type of role. But to start, he should be an outside linebacker. Now, he'll probably be the number 4 behind Watt, Highsmith, and Marcus Golden, which I think was a really key veteran signing to give this team some depth. So Herbig, number 4. That could offer a handful of defensive snaps per game, about 5 to 10. But what I think Herbig can do out of the gate really impactfully is special teams. This team has had a lot of turnover on special teams, losing some of their key guys last year. I think Herbig, with his athleticism, his hair on fire attitude, and I think pass rushers have a real advantage as coverage guys, because on special teams, if you're running down a kick or punt, it's about getting off of blocks. And pass rushers, their job is to get off of blocks. And so I think Herbig could become a core 4-phase top end special teamer immediately, even if that defensive role is going to be pretty minimal. So outside linebacker to start, special teamer. I think in the future, he may float and move to off ball because he's a little undersized to play on the edge against those big offensive tackles.
Okay, let's jump into the chat. How many pages of your famous notes do you actually take during the camp at Latrobe?
Oh man, they're a mess. They're like hieroglyphics. It's I don't know how many pages for sure. It's probably a good 5 pages per day, but I mean it's me scribbling because there's so much going on. It's all shorthand, and so it's kind of all over the place. So I usually post a photo or 2 of my notes, and I'm always confident that no one will ever look over my shoulder and steal my notes at camp because no one can read them. I can barely even read them sometimes. So it's pretty crazy. But yeah, it's probably, I'd say, about 5 pages of notes per day of practice.
Nice.
So Meat Whip 21 wants to know which is the ugliest city of the North. I'm not sure why he's asking that, but
can we go Cleveland? I'll go Cleveland on that one. No, I don't know for sure, but I think the Steelers' answer would be to say something like Cleveland or Cincinnati.
Okay, Alex, what's your opinion about the new stadium rumors? Do you think we need a dome or this beep? I will not say what he's
Yeah, I'm not too. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about that right now because the season is close, and anything that were to happen with the new stadium still would be a couple years. The lease for now Acrisure runs to 2030. Now, if they were going to build a new stadium, they would have to get started well before 2030 so they could make that transition. I'm not really sure what the intentions for the Steelers are for the Rooney family. I would just say that Three Rivers was a stadium for 30 years. And when the lease for, Acrisure is up, it'll be a 30-year-old stadium. Now it's more modernized, than Three Rivers was 1970 to 2000 versus, where Acrisure sits today. But we'll see. I really don't have a great opinion on whether or not to build a new stadium. They're not going to do a dome. I'd be really surprised by that. That's kind of sacrilegious to have a dome, I think, in Pittsburgh. But give it a couple of years and we'll kind of, see where things are at that point.
Roxy78 wants to know, do you visit Sharky's during camp?
I have been to Sharky's. That's one of the popular restaurants right there on Route 30 next to training camp. So I've been there a couple times, but usually for me, like once practice is over, I'm getting home because I got to write the report. We do the podcast. I'm writing for the morning. So I don't usually get to go to a restaurant too often after practice because I'm getting home writing, because it takes a while to write the report. So I want to get that posted as early as possible so no one's reading the report at midnight and trying to stay up just to read the thing.
So a question from me personally: if you could bring back one Steeler to the modern team, who would it be and why?
Man, that is a great question.
Yeah,
There's
it's
no
my
bad
question.
answer.
I know.
There are so many, great answers there. The first thing that came to mind, especially for this current Steelers defense, is Troy, just because he's such an icon. Even knowing the offense may need "quote unquote" more help than the defense, to have a guy like him at strong. Imagine him and Minka next to each other. I mean, you could not throw the ball on the Pittsburgh Steelers if it was Minka Fitzpatrick next to Troy Polamalu. So that was just the most fun, entertaining player. The instincts that he had, the work that he put in. And for being just a quiet guy, before the snap, and then the ball snapped, and I mean, he just goes crazy. So probably the most entertaining player I've ever watched. And so I would go Troy.
I mean, we will still get to our inside linebackers, but I guess Ryan Shazier would be a valuable answer. I mean, I guess we're still missing him since he obviously couldn't play anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think, and obviously replacing him would have been a monumental task. But one issue that Pittsburgh has had is they've gone down this road of signing free agents every single year. I know they drafted Devin Bush and that didn't work out, but they've really tried to do this free agent rotation and it has not worked. I think they're going to have to draft that position again, as they did Shazier, for a long-term answer. I'm not convinced that Cole Holcomb and Landon Roberts are really the long-term answers for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But yeah, they brought in a ton of guys, from Mark Barron, John Bostic, Joe Schobert, Avery Williamson, and none of those guys have stuck. And it is a bit strange because Pittsburgh's all about drafting the position, and they really have not drafted the position as intently as they normally do. And that's a bit curious.
I mean, there's still Tanner Muse, but I guess he's special teams only, is he?
Yeah, I mean, I want to get eyes on him in camp. He's, former safety. There's probably some athleticism there, but my initial thought was when he signed was he would be a special teamer and kind of special teamer only. But we'll see. I want to get eyes on him in camp and kind of see how they're using those guys, because it's a brand new room. I mean, they totally overhauled that room. I mean, it's besides Mark Robinson, it's a brand new group of guys, and so I want to be careful not making too many declarations before watching them. But again, I think long-term answers are really not there for the position.
I still guess his role will be on special teams. I mean, we had so many departures, like Derek Watt, Benny Snell. Okay, they re-signed Miles Boykin, but I guess special teams will be a whole new group, will we?
Yeah, there's going to be some new pieces, as you said, and that's easy to overlook, but there are some core guys, as you mentioned. Watt, Benny Snell to me was a tremendous special teamer. And so talk about that number 3 running back spot. It's a really interesting one. Of course, you have Najee and Jaylen Warren at the top, but behind them, it's pretty open. So special teams will be important there. Connor Hayward, I thought, made an impact there. He can make a bigger impact. Nick Herbig and the rookies, Corey Trace Jr., I think could become a really good special teams kind of guy too. So there's definitely jobs for the taking there.
So you mentioned the inside linebackers we acquired in the free agency. What, in your opinion, was the best move in free agency from the Steelers?
Yeah, it was very active. Omar Khan was certainly busy. I think when you add a guard like Isaac Seumalo, you get that clear starter, veteran experience. To me, a pretty significant upgrade over Kevin Dotson, who's a talented player, but really frustrating and really inconsistent and too penalty prone. So in this effort to really rebuild this offensive line with high draft picks, drafting the first offensive tackle in the first round since 1996 and Broderick Jones, to bring in a guy like Seumalo on top of last year's signings of Mason Cole at center and James Daniels at right guard, really kind of has overhauled and transformed this offensive line. So I think getting Seumalo, for this run game for Kenny Pickett was their biggest offseason addition from a free agency standpoint.
Is this a kind of statement move? So the Steelers will get back to a more physical running game?
It is. That's what they want to be. I mean, their thought is we were 2-6 at the bye week last year, went 7-2 down the stretch, and they did that through their run game. They weren't the most efficient run game, but no team from week 10 and on last year ran the ball as much as the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that helped them in so many ways. It limited turnovers. It played field position. They controlled the clock. They kept opposing offenses off the field, and they became actually the best third down offense that back half of the year. And so they said, that's the blueprint for success. We won that way. Let's build upon it by drafting Broderick Jones and Darnell Washington, by signing Isaac Seumalo, by improving our offensive line depth with Nate Herbig for injury protection. And so they're going to lean on this run game a lot. I mean, their model basically is they want to be the 49ers. They want to be the 49ers of the AFC. That is defense heavy, good front seven, great pass rush, get after the quarterback, create turnovers with a good scheme offensively that's revolved around the run game and play action and bootlegs and all those kinds of things. So week 1 will be really interesting because the Steelers are playing the 49ers, of course, and they're trying to be, I think, San Francisco. And just to see how that game goes as a litmus test for where this team is at is really interesting out of the gate.
So there's a question. Was there a different team chemistry without Latrobe in the pandemic?
That's always hard to judge, especially from afar, but I have to imagine there probably was. And that's what makes Latrobe and camp traditionally for Pittsburgh so special, is because most teams these days, they don't travel. They stay at home. They work at their practice facility. Once practice is done, everybody just goes home, sleeps in their own bed. With Latrobe, they're all together. So you get some of that team bonding. They're playing cards. They're playing Jenga. They're doing whatever, but they're doing it as a team. And you kind of really create some special relationships there. And I think I give Pittsburgh a lot of credit for sticking to Latrobe and then going back even after they were allowed to, because they could have stayed in Pittsburgh and worked at Heinz Field, or then Heinz. I keep saying Heinz Field. I guess I have to say Acrisure Stadium. You guys know what I'm talking about.
You don't have to.
But yeah, I think it's really special to be there and just to be on the same field that Joe Green was on, the late Franco Harris was on, Chuck Noll, and to be in that environment, Latrobe is really special. It's tucked away. You're away from all the distractions of the big city and all that kind of stuff. You're just focused on football. It kind of takes you back to a simpler time. So I think it's special. And yeah, I'm sure in those years, those 2 seasons without being at Latrobe, the chemistry was not as good just because they were not able to build together as a team the way that they normally do.
So Andre wants to know, will we have 4 tight ends at the roster because Connor Hayward will be the Swift knife guy?
Yeah, the way that I think it'll be, I mean, last year they had 3 tight ends and a fullback in Derek Watt. This year I could just see it basically Hayward being the quote-unquote fullback. He'll move around and probably play more non-fullback than fullback. But if you have Freiermuth, Washington, Gentry, and Hayward, there's your 4. It's the same number of people as last year. Hayward's role may switch a little bit. We'll see how much Washington plays versus Gentry. You would expect Washington to hopefully make an immediate impact, but he's still a rookie. We'll have to get eyes on him. But short answer, yeah, I think you would have 3 tight ends, basically 4, whatever you want to call Connor Hayward, but I would expect it to be at the least Hayward, Washington, Freiermuth, and probably Gentry as well.
Cool. And I do have a question.
Who's the player you think can make the 50? Oh, sorry. Just go on.
I have a question about yourself, Alex. As a writer, what's more fun for you personally? Writing about recent news or research about old legendary stories from the past?
Oh, it's definitely the latter. I think the old stories are really cool because some of it's new for me. I had the article today about John Elway beating Jack Lambert for the first time in his NFL debut. I didn't know that story until I did some research on it. So getting for me to learn about the Steelers of yesteryear, the guys that built this franchise as it sits today, I think is really cool. So, recent news is fine, but it's recent news, you're writing it. It's not anything too exciting, but I'm a big Steelers history buff too, even going back to the 1930s and the real roots of this team. There's some really cool stories there. So anytime I can learn and write about history, I jump at the chance to do so.
Is there a personal favorite story from the past?
Yeah, I would give you 2 quickly. My second favorite Steeler of all time, I got some weird favorite Steelers, but my second favorite, his name was Big Daddy Lipscomb. He played in the 60s. He's one of the first true athletes to play defensive line. He was 6'6", 300 pounds, and he was an excellent athlete. I mean, he ran like a linebacker. Actually played some linebacker throughout his career as well. An interesting story, a real character. There's a great my favorite sports article ever written was in Sports Illustrated in 1999. You can find it online, I believe. It's called The Ballad of Big Daddy, and that's how I learned about him. It's a really interesting story there. There's one story that, and I don't know if this is rumor and lore or not, but there was a field goal kick. Pittsburgh was on the field goal block team, and Big Daddy was out there, and they were trying to block the field goal. And so they had the idea, Big Daddy and a teammate, of the teammate was going to get on Big Daddy's shoulders to try to block the field goal for extra height. And the story goes is that I think the field goal was blocked by somebody, and so the ball's bouncing, and Big Daddy wants to run after the football, forgetting the guy still on his shoulders. And so he's running around with this guy on his shoulders. I don't know if that's true, but that's how the story goes. The other one, briefly, is there's a guy named Mose Kelsch. He's the first true kicker in NFL history. He had known the Chief in the early 30s, played on his Sandlot teams, and he kicked the game-winning extra point in the Steelers' first ever win. And so he's considered the first true NFL specialist because he was like 37 years old, couldn't really play running back or anything anymore. So there's some really cool stories in those early 30s Steelers teams, and Mose Kelsch is kind of one of my favorite guys.
Nice.
Smiley89 wants to know, who's the player you think can make the 53-man roster nobody believes in right now?
That's a good question. I'd have to think about that some. In terms of those camp sleepers, again, I kind of referenced this earlier, that third running back spot is pretty open, and there's some kind of unknown sleeper type guys there. Anthony McFarland's there. He's a veteran, more known name, but you got a couple of rookies that are interesting in Alfonso Graham and Darius Hagans, and those guys are athletes. They're speedsters. They can catch, and they have special teams value. And so, last year, Jaylen Warren was that unknown, undrafted free agent that really impressed in the summer, made the team, made a big impact. Now this team's third down back. I don't know if any of the rookies will get to that level, but I think one of those running backs, whether it's Alfonso Graham or Darius Hagans, could be kind of the Jaylen Warren of 2023.
I guess can be also Monty Pottebaum with the opening at fullback.
With the mullet, Monty the mullet. Yeah, I mean he's gonna be a fan favorite for sure. Obviously, making the roster will be tough as a fullback when Connor Hayward can handle some of those duties. But yeah, I mean special teams for him. And Rosie Nix made the team with a similar path and forced Pittsburgh to carry two fullbacks back in I think it was 2015. So you don't want to count that out. He was a former linebacker, Pottebaum was, and so he's probably going to excel on special teams. So. I don't know if he'll make the 53 practice squad. Feels like a good shot for him, but he'll be certainly recognizable at training camp.
And do you have any expectations on Tanner Morgan as the fourth quarterback? Does he have any shot on the third quarterback position, or is it just a camp arm? I mean, I did like him in Minnesota.
Sure. It's going to be tough. I just worry, how many reps will he get? Remember, Pittsburgh had a fourth-string quarterback they drafted last year in Chris Oladokun. I mean, he literally got 0 reps until the very end of training camp, and he was cut
got a
before.
ring.
Yeah, in Kansas City, yeah. I mean, so it all kind of worked out for him, so for sure. But, I think Morgan maybe could get some more reps than that this summer, but it's going to be a tough path with 3 veterans in front, trying to battle Mason Rudolph. I just don't see the path there for Tanner Morgan unless somebody were to get hurt.
Speaking of the quarterbacks, how surprised were you that Mason Rudolph came back?
I was shocked. I would have bet my house on Rudolph not returning. I'd be sitting here without a house right now had I made that bet because I was really surprised. And I guess that speaks to the limited market that was out there for him. But it did not feel like he wanted to come back. Obviously, getting demoted to third string, never really having a true chance to start in the post-Ben era. I thought for sure he would go somewhere else and try to compete for a backup job somewhere, but his return was a big surprise to me. No question about that. I'm happy for it. It's good for Pittsburgh to have a really strong quarterback room top to bottom. I'm not mad about that from the Steelers side. I still don't really get why Rudolph wanted to come back to be third string, but I guess he looked at the market and said, I got no other opportunities and no other good chances, so I might as well come back to the team that I already know pretty well.
And I guess he still puts on like a challenge for Trubisky, or is he the locked number 2?
Yeah, after Trubisky signed that extension, especially, I think it would take something monumental for him to not be the number 2 quarterback. So, barring something crazy, Pickett should be the 1, Trubisky the 2, and Rudolph the number 3 quarterback.
Yeah, I guess
What do you think? Which player from the 2022 season will be the most improved in 23?
There's a lot of great candidates for that because of the rookie class and their impact last year. My mind goes to George Pickens, and obviously he made a ton of plays last year and some, really spectacular downfield moments, but I'm excited for him because his game can become so much more than just a downfield guy. And he'll still be the downfield guy, Z receiver, run the deep ball, make those crazy contested catches. But you kind of saw it late last year where he was being moved around the offense a bit more, playing in the slot, not just being the outside Z receiver. He was running a bit more varied of a route tree, not just those go routes deep downfield. And so I think, with a second year in the NFL, the guy's still only 18 months removed from tearing his ACL. I mean, he had a ACL tear, I think or maybe it was 2021. But point is, like, he missed his last year at Georgia mostly with an ACL injury. So he was a pretty raw guy coming out that was trying to get healthy before the draft. And so there's a lot of growth and potential with George Pickens because I think he's only kind of scratched the surface of where his game can go.
Slotty wants to know, do you think the Steelers are better prepared this season if someone like TJ gets hurt?
I do. And not that there's ever a great plan B if TJ Watt were to get hurt again, but there is some better depth there with Marcus Golden. That was a veteran that this team needed. They didn't have that. They tried to trade for Malik Reed last year, and that did not work out well. He was an undersized guy that does not fit in Pittsburgh's system. Golden brings some more size, and that's going to be good. I think the other thing they did was improve that offensive line depth because, man, Pittsburgh got so lucky last year. They had no offensive line depth last season, and it's incredible how healthy this starting 5 was. The only team in football to have the same starting 5 offensive linemen play in all 17 games. Had they suffered an injury to Dan Moore or even Kevin Dotson, they would have been in real trouble. So when you draft Broderick Jones, that, of course, will increase your starting lineup, but depth as well. Signing Nate Herbig as a backup guard, a really shrewd, good move there. Backup center, still a little up in the air, but overall the offensive line depth is a lot better. So they're better protected against injuries along the O-line this year than they were 1 year ago.
Do you think Kendrick Green would have a chance to make the roster again?
Sure, he'll have a chance. It seems he's working as the backup center right now, but obviously he's been a big disappointment. I really put the fault of the Kendrick Green struggles more on the Steelers than Kendrick Green. I think they considered him to be somebody he wasn't, this day one ready center. I mean, he was none of that. He was a project. He needed some work not to be thrown into the fire and replace, Marquise Pouncey, a future Hall of Famer. Just too much on his plate out of the gate. But yeah, I mean, he's probably the quote unquote favorite to be the backup center right now, but there's competition, both internal and maybe external as well. But that'll be one of those battles to watch, and Green will have a chance. He's certainly got to play better and play better quickly, but he will have a chance.
Okay. So I will come back to the chat. Will there be one bone for 2 dogs at the punter position?
Yeah. And as I said, punter question important. It is an important punter question. Obviously only going to carry one punter. So Presley Harvin versus Braden Mann, that's going to be the battle. And they're actually pretty similar guys. They're strong leg punters. They were both Ray Guy award winners in college, which went to the best NCAA punter with some inconsistency issues. And so it's kind of a bit weird because Mann to me is pretty similar to Harvin overall. But yeah, I mean, whoever's the better punter in camp and more specifically in the 3 preseason games will be this team's starting punter. So yeah, it's 2 dogs, 1 bone at punter.
Is it just a head thing for Presley, or can you practice consistency in your opinion?
Yeah, I think you can. Consistency is all about technique. When you're inconsistent, that means your technique is inconsistent. And I'm not an expert on punter mechanics, but your leg swing and your follow through and those kinds of things impact that. So to me, at that position, those specialist positions, it's all about your technique. And can you repeat the same stroke that you need to make as a punter? If you don't, then you become inconsistent. That doesn't just happen out of nowhere. It happens out of a flaw. It's like a pitcher in baseball. If they're not pitching well, it's probably because their mechanics are messed up and they're not consistently, with their arm slot or whatever the case is. So the same applies for punters and kickers.
Yeah, true.
What are your views on Calvin Austin III? For me, it seems you either read only hype news or the opposite. But how much of an impact can he really make?
It's a fair point. There is a lot of hype around a guy who is yet to play in an NFL game, let alone make a play in an NFL game. Now, I'm excited about him. I think he's like a rookie that's coming back to this team because he wasn't there last year, but he has the benefit of at least mentally having the experience of 1 year in the system. So, we'll see. I think he's a guy that can provide big plays for this offense, and this offense needs to make some big plays, and Austin's capable of that, whether that's vertically with his speed or in the horizontal game where Matt Canada can scheme that up on jet sweeps and screens and RPOs and stuff like that to get him out there in space. So, it's to be determined. I'm cautiously optimistic, but also recognize this guy's got to get in the stadium, and we really don't know that much more about Calvin Austin in year 2 than we did in year 1. So you hope for the best with him, but you're not quite sure until you actually start to see it inside a stadium.
Do you think he will be considered as a return guy?
Yes, he should be. Now, he didn't do kicks in college. He did some punts, but I think he could do both in the NFL, especially with kick returners probably being a little bit less valuable with those new rule changes that are going to increase the number of fair catches and touchbacks. So, the kick and punt return battle is pretty wide open. It's him. It's Gunnar Olszewski. They got a rookie in Jordan Byrd, who was a big return guy in college. He'll have a tough path to make it, but he'll certainly get opportunities to do so. But ideally, Calvin Austin is this team starting kick and punt returner. That would be the best and easiest thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I guess that's the thing with the wide receiver corps. Like who's getting that number 5 or 6 spot for like playing the special team roles. Who's your favorite on these bottom roster positions? Like me, for example, I really did like Hakeem Butler playing in Iowa State, or also Des Fitzpatrick. So I'm wondering.
Sure. Yeah, I think the top 5 are pretty much locked in, barring something unforeseen. You have Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, Allen Robinson, Calvin Austin, and I think Miles Boykin makes it as that, gunner. He was a great gunner last year for the Steelers. He should have that special teams coverage hat. They may only keep 5. There's nothing that says they have to keep more than that. It's going to come down to who earns it, if anyone earns it. I'm with you. Hakeem Butler's interesting. His first go around in the NFL was not successful. He's not yet caught an NFL pass, but he had a good year in the XFL with the Battlehawks, and he's a big slot type of receiver that's pretty interesting with some size advantage inside. So it could be him. If Calvin Austin were to really falter in the return game, Gunnar Olszewski's there. I don't want to totally count him out. He lost his job last year, but he's got that. He was signed to be a return guy, and so that's still on the table. So I think the 5 are the 5, and if somebody proves themselves worthy, then you're talking adding in that 6th receiver, which would probably be either Hakeem Butler or Gunnar Olszewski if they need a return guy and he can fill that role.
The question is, what will be will be there less kickoff returns because of the new kickoff rule with that fair catch? I mean, is there even a value in keeping an extra spot for kickoff return specialists?
It's really tough to justify that. The NFL is anticipating about a 7 to 10% reduction in kick returns this year. And for those that don't know, this new rule says if you could stand at your 1 yard line and if you catch the ball and fair catch it, it now comes out to the 25. So there's less incentive to actually return it if you're a kick returner. I think some teams will still do it because they have some good kick returners. The Vikings, for example, have a great kick returner that may return more than other teams. It's not going to be a total fair catch fest, but you're going to see a reduction there. And it's really tough to have just a pure kick returner. Ideally, you find somebody who can do both, who can be your kick and punt returner. Not everyone can do that. The skill set is different, but that is the best way to maximize the efficiency on your roster, is having one guy do both return spots. So that's where a guy like Calvin Austin can hopefully do that, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Alex, I just want to play a little game, if you will. Sure. I will say a word or a sentence, and you will answer with the first thing that comes to your mind. Is that okay for you?
I'm game. Sure.
Okay. Let's start with Ben Roethlisberger.
Tough and Ravens, and they go hand in hand, because you think about those, as you mentioned earlier, getting your nose broken by Haloti Ngata punching you in the face and staying in the game. I said this earlier to somebody else about Kenny Pickett and that comeback win he had last year against Baltimore. In Pittsburgh, you're defined by what you do against Baltimore. You beat the Ravens, they'll build statues for you in Pittsburgh. And there was no better rivalry than Steelers-Ravens, and there still isn't, in my opinion. And so when I think Ben, I think toughness, and I think Baltimore.
Rooney's relocating the Steelers.
I mean, it's impossible. I mean, can you imagine that ever happening? There is a story about in like 1940 where there's some potential of Rooney selling part of the team to some big business guy. But that aside, I mean, obviously in this present day, it's never going to happen. The fan base is too strong. It just, so the word would be, impossible. Never going to happen.
Mike Tomlin.
Leader. And I don't want to, obviously I think he's a tremendous leader and motivator. He's also a really smart X's and O's coach. He does not get the credit he should for his actual football acumen, but there's certainly no question his ability to lead and do that in different ways. He has the saying that he treats everyone fairly, but not everybody equally. And so it's whatever you need as a player. Do you need tough love? Do you need an arm around you? How do you learn? How do you teach? But he treats everybody fairly and with respect. That's why players buy in. He's never lost that locker room in his entire tenure. And to me, that's the singular most impressive thing about Mike Tomlin is he's kept that locker room together the entire tenure. And there have been some issues in that locker room, as we've come to find out during and after. And to do that consistently, I'm not sure who else could have accomplished that. So leader, Mike Tomlin.
Steelers inside linebackers.
Musical chairs. I mean, that's what they're playing right now. I mean, it's just been a rotating group of guys, and I understand the need to overhaul that room. Last year's group did not meet expectations. I'm not sad about letting Devin Bush go to Seattle or cutting Miles Jack. That's all well and good, but they're going down the same path they had before. Signed a couple of free agent veterans and hope this group works out. I'm pessimistic, but we'll see. It's certainly the game of musical chairs continues.
And the last one, Steelers losing the Super Bowl in Vegas.
Oh, very specific. Steelers losing Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean, I just go back to their loss against Green Bay and how much that hurt. And so anytime you think about that, it's certainly painful. Although to me, just from my standpoint, I think the team losing the 2004 AFC title game against the Patriots hurt me more than their Super Bowl loss to Green Bay. Maybe because I was younger, but I thought that 2004 team, you're 15-1, Ben a rookie. It's a team of destiny, right? And then Rodney Harrison pick sixes Ben, and they go on to lose that game. So, those are certainly some of the toughest losses you've ever had to experience.
So we have two more questions from the chat. Apart from football, which sport do you like the most? Or do you
I'd say
watch
baseball.
the most?
Yeah, I'm a Pirates fan. I like going out there. So I'm not as hardcore with anything like football, but I'm definitely a pretty decent baseball fan.
Okay. And Slotty wants to know your bold prediction for the Steelers season.
That's a good question. I'd have to think about that some. I'm always careful with bold predictions because people will hold me to them, and I'll get that back on Old Takes Exposed or Freezing Cold Takes in a couple of months. So I'm always very careful with my words.
We'll never do that. We'll never do that.
Someone will find this, though. Someone will definitely find this and clip this. So I'm always careful with that. In terms of a bold prediction, I think it'll be a career year for Najee Harris. Maybe that's not super bold, but I think he's going to have a really good year. This offensive line is healthy. He'll be healthy. There's a more structure and better identity and vision for what this team wants to be. They really lacked the first half of last year. And so I'm expecting big things from Najee Harris.
Cool.
What do you think about the Steelers' playoff chances in 23?
They'll be competitive. I mean, they're going to be in this mix until the end. I fully expect, that Week 18 game against Baltimore on the road is probably going to mean a ton for both teams. The Steelers have built this thing where they have a pretty high floor. Now, how high is their ceiling? It's a different question. Can they go toe-to-toe with the top offenses, the top teams in the AFC? I'm not convinced of that, but they have a high floor where they're going to have a good defense and run game and find ways to win those low-scoring affairs. So The expectation should be for this team to make the playoffs. That is more than reasonable. And again, as I said at the top, they really need to win a playoff game. And those things are all easier said than done in a very competitive division, a very competitive conference. But that needs to be the standard to break that drought, win a playoff game at minimum. That's what has to happen this year.
So we asked a ton of questions. Do you have a question for us?
Yeah, I would love to know how you guys became Steeler fans. I'd love to know that story because for me, I just grew up in Pittsburgh. Like it was right there. I would love to know each of your stories of how you became black and gold fans.
Start,
I
Sasha.
guess they're really.
Yours is the longest.
I guess they're all really unique.
No, I want to hear it.
Well, I'm watching or I'm following football since the late 80s, early 90s. And I became a Steelers fan first because of the colors, black and gold, and then because of Bill Cowher and, of course, my man Rod Woodson. I played semi-pro football at that time here in Germany, and Rod grew in a kind of an idol for me. And then when I first visited Pittsburgh in the 90s, I was able to even meet him. And I was invited to his family during my next days. I could stay at their house and stuff like that. So it was really
Oh, wow.
an awesome experience and something I will never forget.
Absolutely. If I could just follow up really quickly, how did you get invited to his house and how can I get invited to his house? That's incredible. That's amazing.
It was kind of, well, I wouldn't say easy, but he had his restaurant in the city at that time. So I just went to the restaurant, brought a bottle of German wine, and he liked that a lot. And he introduced me to the manager of the restaurant, and he said, "Hey, take care of this guy." And that was the uncle of Rod Woodson. So it kind of started there.
Sure. That's awesome.
So I actually met his family more often than Rod himself because he was at practice, or in the later years, he wasn't even playing in Pittsburgh anymore. But I still
he went Baltimore. Were you still friends with the family even though he went to Baltimore?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was strange because I went to a game in Pittsburgh against Baltimore, and I got some tickets in his family section, and they all had purple jerseys, and I was the only one with the Steelers jersey. So that was kind of strange, yeah.
That's awesome. That's crazy.
Next,
Jonas?
I try to keep it short. So, like back in school, we had a student exchange with Pittsburgh, so with Upper St. Clair High School. So there was this partnership program going on that I wasn't a part of. That's the main reason I'm a Steelers fan, because I was like, I actually wanted to. I really wanted to go. I wasn't a Steelers fan, but I really wanted to go to the US, and I was like super jealous because my sister, she did go there, and then they brought over all these US students, and they taught me the game because it was like October, I guess, and they wanted to see the game of the Steelers on Sundays. So I put it on, and I didn't know anything about the game. They taught me everything, and that's how I just got. I just stuck with football and the Steelers, obviously. And I mean, last year it was my first trip to the US, and my best friend, he's a Raven. So don't ask me why. Don't ask me why. And I was like, I need to go to that high school, and he was like, why is that? I mean, like, I was like, I just have to like cross something off my bucket list, and it's on there since 10 years, and there was like nothing going on. It was like just a normal day at school. I was like, I just have to be at the campus. That's all it is. So I mean, after that I started playing over here in Germany, and we started with Steelers Nation Germany, and it's just becoming a thing now.
Yeah, my story is simple. I'm a Steelers fan since 2007. I went to Afghanistan with the German army, and I met some guys, some American soldiers. I'm not sure if they were actually from Pittsburgh or from the area, but they told me everything about the NFL, about Pittsburgh, about the mentality of the city, and about Ben Roethlisberger. And ever since, I fall in love with that, with the city, with the franchise, and yeah, that's the short answer.
Right. Gotcha. Have you guys all been to the U.S.? Or I know
Yeah.
two of you guys. Have you all been to the U.S. before?
Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yeah. What is? I was going to ask just really quickly. What is like the biggest culture shock as someone from Germany coming to the U.S.?
Seeing guys that weigh more than 200 pounds, all going with an electric wheelchair, that was a cultural shock for me, really.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So I don't want to hit on stereotypes here, like at least German stereotypes.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you.
But I mean, we went to Maryland versus Northwestern, and like during halftime, I tried to get a beer, and the girl was like, I need your ID, and I was like showing her my German passport, and she was like, oh no, only US IDs. And I was like, come on, I'm drinking beer since 10 years or since I'm like 16, and now I can't even get a Bud Light. So
my God, that's funny.
For me, the biggest culture shock was when I first went there. Most people were very friendly, but in the end, a lot of Americans are very superficial. So they're very friendly to you when they meet you and talk to you, but it's hard to really grow into deep friendships, kind of like that. Yeah.
Sure. No, yeah,
So
I totally get that.
Here in Germany, when you meet new people, it's harder to meet new people, but it's easier to make friendships. I would take it like that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, I can get that for sure.
So, Alex, thank you for coming to our show. I guess we all appreciate that you took the time. Maybe we can repeat this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come on. I think what you guys are doing is super cool. I see the chat's been like going nonstop. You guys have an awesome fan base. So anytime you guys want me back on, I'd be more than happy to join you guys again.
Wow. Thank you.
So now
you
you're gonna
much.
To the chat. You're gonna clip that now.
yeah, for sure. But no, I appreciate you guys so much.
Thank you, Alex. It was a great time.
Yeah,
It was a blast.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, take care, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good night. Bye.